Today, I'd like to share with you some thoughts on goats in a permaculture setting. We brought in a small flock of goats a little over a year ago. And because we were novices with goat keeping, we started out with 3 wethers, 3 castrated males that we acquired from a friend. So kind of to give us a little bit of a feeling or a sense of what it'll be to keep goats. This past spring we acquired from this same friend 2 does, one of which was pregnant, so we ended up having baby goat. Actually had 2, but one didn't survive. This one is a boy that we are now keeping as a buckling. When we brought goats in, we were thinking in terms of the needs that the animals will have, as well as the benefits that we're going to obtain from them. And so with that in mind, we had been researching breeds, and we are being researching behaviors and all those things. And so we realized that there was a lot of benefits that we could get from having goats incorporated into our system. So starting first with the needs that the animals will have, well, the obvious things: a need for shelter, there's need for water, food, of course. They have to be contained. Having the animals is not just keeping them contained in a place and giving them food and having a shelter, but making sure that they're happy. And that means spending time with them. So love is one of those things that they all need, right? And so those are all the elements that we were thinking about in terms of what the goats are going to need from us. But then we start to look into the benefits that we could obtain from keeping goats. And obviously the obvious ones will be, well, we can get milk, we could potentially get food, we could get leather. But then there were other elements that really excited us about the potential of having goats. For example, we could enroll goats for free labor. That is, having them to clear up areas that are difficult to maintain. Goats are browsers, and so we have a lot of edges and things that have to be maintained and taken care of, and goats are really good at that. That's what they like, and especially when it comes to food sources, that's what they like. And so when we start to think in those terms, then you realize that there's a number of potential benefits and you can get from them. The goats have been able to clear up an area that we intend to convert into a food forest, and to that end we let them browse in this area for about 2 months. They cleared up all the brush that was here, and let some of the trees over here that I'm interested in keeping in a way that can be manageable and useful for us to bring in some other crops. For example, in this patch where I'm standing now, there are a number of trees or plants that I knew were here, that I had actually, that I was excited that they were here, and I want to let them grow. So we have 2 fairly grown autumn olives, actually 3, that incidentally the goats love. They love to browse on autumn olives. And so when you look at what they've done here, is that they clear all the lower part, so we have all the brush on top, where we've been harvesting fruit, and that give us some space for adding some other elements, some fruit trees and some nuts, and so other elements I'm going to be bringing in. The nice thing about these plants, these trees, the way they look now, is that we can compass them, and so that way there's not much of a competition for light once we bring in the fruit trees. So additionally, we have several black locust trees that I'm going to live here too. I'll probably do the same thing. I'll coppice them, so to reduce a little bit of competition for light once we bring fruit trees in here. The nice thing is that by having all these nitrogen fixers, I anticipate to have a relatively fertile soil, on top of the fact that there's a lot of ashes here that can also be added as amendments to the soil. And so I'm really excited at what we are going to be able to accomplish here, and I'm really grateful that the goats have done such a terrific job in this spot, that as I'm ready to get them out of here, going to all I need to do now is just bring in the plants, and so that's a great time saver for me, and obviously something that is making them happy because they're doing what they like to do. It's making me very happy because it's saving me time, and so and I think it's a win-win situation when we can manage and we can plan and we can implement these elements by thinking in terms of what can some elements do for the benefit of others. Goats could also be used to maintain food forests, especially with small breeds like Nigerian dwarfs that will browse at a certain height, so no higher than 4 feet or 5. And so for food forest maintenance, then that's a great asset in that they can come in, clear the underbrush and things that might not necessarily be needed, or they might just things that will rejuvenate. And so, and while doing that, they're also providing fertilizer. So that's another great asset, or another great element that you can get out of the goats. Something that surpassed our expectations is goats for compost production. So we make sure that the little space where they sleep, it's clean continuously. We have it clean, and so we use a lot of bedding in it. And so goats deposit all that manure there overnight or during the day when they're in that shelter, and that's materials that we can later collect. So in fact, we do that every 3-4 weeks, and then it goes into the compost pile where it gets mixed with some other compost material, green materials or browns, and chicken manure, or like recently, a couple of weeks ago, we processed 50 chickens. So all the innards and all the parts that will not be consumed went into the compost pile. So added to this, we created this year we've actually created a large amount of compost, and that's something that we owe in great deal to what the goats are doing. Another advantage or another positive thing that we've experienced is that, contrary to what we've read and what we've been told, goats have been pretty easy to contain in a space, and for that end we have been using electric netting to keep them in. They really respect that. I suppose that while they're being trained, having the netting to be really hot or so, and once I get that shocked a couple of times, I really become respectful of that, and that has worked beautifully for us. We haven't had any issues with goats escaping, which is something we're concerned about, especially because we have a lot of valuable food growing all around us. In terms of animal health, because this is something that we have read a lot, goats are prone to disease, and especially parasites and all those things. So our experience so far has been this. We have had some goats getting sick, but we have not treated them with any kind of pharmaceutical or any kind of chemicals. We mostly use natural treatments, and by that what I'm talking about is just letting the goats essentially browse for what they feel, what they know it is beneficial to them. Even though this is all empirical, I know that some of them have good results just by browsing for things that people normally won't let them eat, or maybe they're just having some kind of mineral deficiency or so, and they've are allowed to browse for those things within the space where they're contained. For example, this area where there's staying now is an area that we reclaimed, and that was one of the first experiments that we did with goats, to have them reclaim this space which was so overgrown. There was a huge patch of honeysuckle and this area was kind of like a dump for the previous owner of this property, and so there was a lot of old wood, and they will burn all that here, so there was a lot of ash and a lot of debris, metal debris or so. And what is fascinating to me is that things that I would otherwise discourage the animals from doing, but they're coming and they're licking into the little patches of ashes that were out there. And so I'm concerned that, well, can this be harmful to the goats? But I'm still letting them do that, knowing that, trusting that they know what is it that is good for them. And certainly what I've noticed, having the animals showing signs of scores or things like that, diarrhea to be specific, it essentially went away on its own, you know. And so to that end, then we haven't had any major issues with animals being sick. The other part is that we try to move them around the property, and so by doing so we like to think that we're breaking the parasites cycles. So all in all, our experience with goats in a permaculture system has been incredibly positive, and so we're excited to be able to, as time goes by, to start thinking about other ways we can utilize this resource for the benefit of the land, for our own benefit, and for their own benefit too. I hope this video has been useful to you, and I hope that you consider subscribing to the channel if you have not, or liking this video. In the meantime, I thank you for your visit, and blessings to you.